Hello, everyone. Welcome back. I'm Christine Dixon of The Ordinary Sacred, and I'm so happy that you are back with me. This is actually part 2 of the mini training on common protector concerns. So if you haven't watched the first one, in the first one, I go over the first 5 most common concerns that protectors have about relaxing, about allowing self-energy in the system. And today I'm going to go over the second 5, 6 through 10. And it's so helpful to know these because they come up very, very frequently. And it's helpful to kind of know what it looks like to meet their concerns. So I'm going to share my screen with you. All right, so hopefully you are seeing the PowerPoint number 6. So the 6th fear that protectors might have is the fear of finding out something new about the past, some new secret that's revealed. They're really afraid of being blindsided and that the system won't be able to handle it, that secrets will be exposed, and either the internal system, the internal family, or maybe the external system, the family, people around that person cannot handle it. And again, just like with the first 5, it's always about validating and meeting their concerns. Their concerns are always valid. They truly believe that the client or perhaps their family, the people around them, cannot handle if something came out. Sometimes it might be, some kind of abuse that they experienced in the past, and what will that mean? What will they have to do with it? Sometimes it's just the overwhelm inside, and we can update them about the client's age so that they know how old they are. Sometimes they think, they're 3 years old and they can't handle it. So here on the right are some of the responses that might come from self, that I've seen from self. That's not our goal. Our goal is not to try to find some secret. But if it does happen, we can help relieve the parts that are carrying pain from those times. Like we can handle it. And the client's self can handle it. Again, updating about the age. And then you can also, or the self might also say, you don't have to make any decisions about what would need to change, like take legal action, cut off contact, any of that. Let's just help the parts that might be hurting or vulnerable. Sometimes people are afraid that if they find out something that they're going to have to, it's going to change the whole dynamic of their family. And we can just get, reassure them that that won't happen until, or if and when the whole system is on board with that. Sometimes that might be a self-led decision, but it wouldn't happen against the will of a protective part. So you're always just listening and, not steamrolling over these parts. The self also might say, we don't need to go there until you feel it's safe to do so. You are the boss, right? You never want to push a part into territory that it's afraid of, that it doesn't want to go to. You want to make sure that their concerns are met, that they really feel like it's safe to do so, go at their pace. Otherwise, there will be backlash. The fear that'll come in, self-harming parts, dissociative parts, collapse parts, harsh inner critics, things like that will come out if we bypass these protectors. So it's really important to say, we're not going to go into anything until you feel that it's safe enough. And what do you need for that to happen? One other small thing I want to say about this is it also reminds me of when sometimes parts will tell a certain history and there will be skeptical parts about it. They'll say, did that really happen? I don't know if that really happened. Sometimes there are parts that actually block a person's memory from events that happen. But sometimes there are also skeptical parts when a part divulges something. Did that really happen? And usually what I'll tell them is, it happened to this part. I don't know if it happened in real life or not, but it's very significant that this part is telling you this, because that was this part's experience and we really want to validate it. Like sometimes a part will say, you know, it felt like they threw me out of the window, and they didn't actually throw them out of the window, but that's how it felt to that part. And they're really trying to help you get how they felt in that situation. So always want to just validate their experience. Okay. Another concern that protectors have is external constraints. And this is a very valid concern. So they're concerned that the external world does not support whatever change perhaps the self is proposing. So they think that without their job, this protective thing that they do for them, that the client will become too dependent, needy, vulnerable, or open to some kind of harm or abuse in their environment. And that may be very true. So it's really important to, you know, the first bullet point says, assess the legitimacy of the present danger. Is this true? Is this something that happened in the past? This is a part that's stuck in the past. It's afraid it's going to happen now. Or is this a legitimate threat in the present? For example, if a person is still living in a home with their abusive parents or an abusive spouse, or maybe they're in a job with an abusive boss, right? So the threat is genuine. It's valid. It's true. So you might encourage the person to find safety inside and to only make external changes if and when it is safe to do so. So again, you're really allied with these protective parts. Sometimes they need to be doing their job because the person is in clear and present danger, right? The threat is real now, and we don't want to get these protective parts to relax back. And then depending on the kind of external constraint, we might say, you know, we can help you deal with that person in a way that won't be at odds with your healing. Sometimes it's doing work around setting boundaries, healthy boundaries, distance with someone. But again, that might not be safe for them to do with, say, a parent or a partner in the home who is volatile. So, that may or may not be possible, but maybe you can offer, can I meet with you and this person you're concerned about? And you know, we can try that. You can try to make changes in the external world, and that may or may not be possible. And finally, you might say, and if this other person objected, what are you afraid would happen? What if we could make it so that you're less vulnerable to that person's reaction? Would you let us help this other part then? So sometimes the fear is that if say you release a cultural burden, right? Or a religious burden, but you're part of a religious community. And if you release that, other people are going to have a really big reaction. They might even kick you out of your community. That's a very valid fear. And so you might say, we won't do anything in the external world until there is enough safety in the internal world that these vulnerable parts would be soothed and comforted and have that secure attachment, even if this reaction outside did happen, even if there was judgment, criticism, abandonment, excommunication, but we won't do it until the parts feel that it's safe enough to do it. So yeah, these external constraints are a big deal, really important to take them seriously and not try to push a person into any kind of change that will be unsafe for them in their environment. But you can do a lot inside to create that safe haven inside of them until they are ready to make that change. Okay, number 8 is the fear of exile or exiles getting hurt again, either by the client or the therapist or another part. So if the vulnerable exile comes to the surface, they could be rewounded. This is true. This can happen. If a vulnerable exile that is so afraid of criticism comes up to the surface, and then the person in front of you, berates you, that exile is going to feel so much pain and overwhelm that floods the system. So that's true. So some responses that the self might give would be, it makes sense that you're worried about that, and we are here to help. Or you can come back in and stop us if you think that's happening. Like if you think the therapist is not safe, if you think, as the practitioner, you can say, if you think that any part of me is coming up and harming a part, maybe you see a critical part coming up in me, a judgmental part, please tell me. You have permission to speak up to me. And then I'll go and talk to those parts and ask them to relax back so that myself can be showing up. And then finally, we can make sure the other part does not interfere or hurt the exile. So I would say if a part is concerned, if I step back and the exile comes forward, this other part over here, this really big critic, might come and attack the exile. Very, very valid. What I would say is, okay, we won't go to the exile until we can work with that critic first. Do you want me to go to the critic and see what they're protecting and see if they can relax back so that they're not a threat? And usually the part says, yes, yes, please, please do that. So they're pointing you to where another protector needs to be unburdened before this one will be able to relax. So it's always very, very valuable information. All right, number 9 is the concern that self-energy is dangerous. Again, a very valid concern, because this part may have learned that qualities of self-energy were not safe to have. So you might explore with them the experience of self-energy, the 8 C's of self, being shamed or punished. So maybe if they acted curious as a child, that was punished in them. Maybe if they were calm, the system feels like that's not safe. I've got to be hypervigilant and constantly be looking out for threat. If I'm calm, it's not safe to be that. They might have been punished or mocked or ridiculed for being creative. They might, their hand might have been slapped down every time they tried to connect. You can go through, if maybe they showed confidence and that was called pride and shamed in them, right? So you might go through and see kind of what experiences they had and why this makes sense that self-energy was not safe for them. And then you might, again, kind of make this really small experiment of agreeing to introduce the parts to self-energy very gradually so that they can begin to gain trust and see if it's safe. And again, they are the boss. They can come in and say, no, it's not safe, right? And maybe if they are in an environment with an abuser now, it may not be safe for their self to come out. They need their protectors to be there. But if they are in a safe environment now, they can go back in time to these parts and these experiences, these trauma moments where it wasn't safe, and they can update them and reparent and redo and retrieve them out of that time, unburden that shame, that fear. And then once that happens, they can invite some of these 8C qualities back in. Actually, their exiled parts will likely, resume those natural qualities once they feel it's safe to do so. All right, and we are on number 10. So another common concern that protectors might have, to stop doing their job, is that therapy will end. If everything is great and the self is leading, then there might be a loss of relationship with the therapist or coach who's not needed anymore. So the part may believe that the self will take the place of other valuable relationships and they won't be needed. So you can assure the client that there is room for both relationship with self and relationship with therapist, coach, practitioner. All the self the more self, the merrier. And that if there did come a time when the system was ready to part ways with the therapist or coach, that it would be a self-led decision where all of the parts were on board with that and they felt comfortable with that, that there would be no pressure to do that, and that it wouldn't be an automatic thing just because their self was coming in. So sometimes people need validation with that too. All right. I hope that was helpful. Again, if you haven't watched part 1, go back and watch part 1. All 10 of these are very common. They can come up whenever you're trying to get to know a protector, or you ask the protector to give space for self to come in. They may say, no, absolutely not. And when you ask, what are you afraid would happen if you did give space to self? These are some of the things they might say, right? You'll find out something something that blindsides us, or your system will be completely overwhelmed. You won't need me anymore. I'll be obsolete. It's not safe in my present environment for me to relax back. It's not safe to have self energy, right? They will tell you these things. And so I'm curious if you have experienced these concerns, this resonates with you from your protective parts, or perhaps your client's protective parts, or maybe if you want to add some other ones that you've heard from protectors. What other concerns have you heard? And do you have any questions about how to meet these concerns? Let me know in the comments.